500 years, 5 empires, one incredible truth. Discover the surprising future America is facing now. Maria stared at the newspaper clipping, the faded edges slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. Her pulse raced as she took in the headline. Local historian uncovers ancient land rights. Time seemed to freeze, and suddenly the room filled with echoes of her mother's stories. Sacrifices, struggles, whispers of injustice. They surged through Maria's mind, igniting a fierce determination within her. What did that map mean for her students? Could it be a ticket to reclaiming not just her family's dignity, but also a fight against the very inequalities she faced daily in her classroom? The weight of her past pressed heavily on her chest. Maria had spent countless nights devising lesson plans that ignited a passion for learning while battling the constraints of a system that dismissed her as unqualified. The irony stung. She had earned her degree and worked tirelessly, yet the school administrators rolled their eyes at her innovative methods. Her insights drowned in a sea of skepticism. The fear of being deemed unworthy set off a chain reaction of doubts in her heart. She couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy, often wondering if opening her mouth at all was worth the risk. What if she fell flat? What if they laughed? As the whispers swirled around her, Maria's thoughts spiraled. The faculty room had once been a safe haven, a place to discuss ideas, share frustrations, and grab a quick coffee break. Now, her colleagues glanced at her with wary eyes. Their friendly smiles turned cold and judgmental. She was on an edge, balancing on the thin line between honesty and self-preservation. Was it wise to pursue justice when it could shatter her career? Complicated questions gnawed at her. Legacy versus livelihood. Before Maria could lose herself in her thoughts, a voice broke through her spiraling angst. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Shaking herself back to the present, Maria prepared for the school board meeting. The very thought of standing before the board, her voice trembling as she unveiled her discovery, sent shivers down her spine. Would they dismiss her again? Would it be yet another moment when her voice would echo unheard? She clutched the map tightly, her fingers digging into the paper, as if drawing strength from those faded lines. As she took her place at the podium, breaths were shallow, heart racing. She could almost taste the tension in the air. Eyes scrutinized her, judging, doubting. Her colleagues, her superiors, even the parents seated nearby. The weight of their expectations bore down, and the prospect of failure loomed larger than her dreams of victory. She opened her mouth, words caught in her throat, and felt the entire room shift, a collective leaning in, anticipating her next move. Just then, she noticed a familiar face in the audience, a colleague whose previous whispers of skepticism hung in the air like a curtain. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the stakes higher. Every heartbeat echoed her internal debate. Should she risk herself for a chance at justice, or retreat in order to protect the fragile stability of her job? The silence was deafening, and Maria felt the raw urge to scream drowned in her own internal conflict, as a question loomed before her, challenging her very core. How far was she willing to go for justice? The silence hung in the air thick with uncertainty. Maria felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. As the board members shifted in their seats, their expressions a mix of curiosity and doubt, her grip on the map tightened. She had to remind herself that this wasn't just about her. It was about those who had come before her, those who had lived the injustice,
and those who would come after. Her heart pounded, each beat a reminder of her mission. "I have discovered something significant," she began, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. "A map that could redefine our understanding of the land rights in this community. It's not simply a historical artifact. It's a living document that embodies the struggles and aspirations of my family and others like us." As she spoke, she sensed the collective intake of breath, a flicker of interest crossing the board members' faces. For the first time, she felt a connection forge across the room, even with those who had once doubted her abilities. This was her platform to challenge the assumptions they held, to take back her narrative. She noticed her colleague's skeptical gaze softened just a fraction. That small shift in her demeanor sparked a flicker of hope in Maria. Maybe she wouldn't be dismissed after all. As she unfolded the map meticulously, tracing her finger along the faded lines, she shared stories passed down through generations. This land is not just a mark on a page. It represents persistence, resilience, and an unyielding spirit to reclaim our heritage. Each word fell deliberately, a calculated effort to sway even the most entrenched skeptics. The tension shifted as she noticed some board members leaning forward, their previously indifferent expressions shifting to concern and interest. Yet, even with this awakening, doubt crept back in. What if they didn't care? What if they dismiss it as irrelevant? Would her passion be enough to face the tidal wave of institutional inertia? A gnawing apprehension lingered. What if she laid herself bare, only to be met?
The board chair, Mr. Jenkins, broke the silence that had descended after Maria's speech. "This is certainly a fascinating revelation, Maria. However, how do you envision this impacting curriculum requirements?" His question was probing, a veiled challenge. Maria could feel the tension of the room shift, all eyes now set firmly on her. This was it, a moment of truth for both her and the audience. "I believe we can use this as a critical teaching moment," Maria replied, heart racing yet empowered by her own conviction. "By integrating this history into our lessons, we can inspire students to understand the weight of our past and empower them to advocate for their futures. Imagine a classroom where students don't just learn facts, but live them, embodying the spirit of change." As she spoke, Maria sensed a spark igniting around her. The idea was catching on, and her voice grew louder, filled with purpose. She had transformed fear into conviction, resentment into resolve. This was not just about educational reform. It was about breathing life into the struggles of the past, about weaving a narrative that honored her heritage while paving the way for a new legacy. The murmurs among the board started to grow, offering the evidence of her influence, voices of support budding amongst skepticism. But as Maria basked in this moment of clarity, she caught that familiar skeptical gaze once again. What might her colleagues say next? Would it be support or another layer of skepticism threatening to undermine her newfound confidence? The tension in the room thickened once more as the question lingered. Was she truly ready for the ensuing confrontation that was bound to follow? Maria's mind raced as the tension crackled around her like static electricity. She could see Mr. Jenkins' determination to question her further. It was reflected in the steely glint of his eye. What had begun as tentative support felt as fragile as spun glass in her hands. Was the validation she sought truly within reach, or closer to shattering? In that moment, as the board chair leaned forward, Maria swiftly catalogued her thoughts, searching for strategy amid her anxiety. She could almost hear the relentless ticking of her internal clock, urging her to seize the moment. "This is not merely an academic exercise," she said, forcing herself to project a steadiness that mirrored her growing conviction. "It's a pathway toward reconciliation and understanding that can reshape our students' engagement with history." "Reconciliation?" Mr. Jenkins echoed, the corner of his mouth curling in skepticism. "Do you believe a mere map can achieve that?" Her breath caught, and in that split second, the old fears threatened to resurface. What if he was right? What if this fragile hope she kindled would become another disappointment? Yet Maria locked eyes with him and felt something shift inside her, a resolve that had eluded her moments earlier. "I know it sounds ambitious, but consider this. A history without nuances is merely a shadow of the truth," Maria responded, her voice steadying, emboldened by the weight of her ancestors. "This map connects us to those narratives, the silenced voices of our community. By integrating this into our educational framework, we not only honor those stories, but also teach our students empathy and responsibility." Each argument constructed itself like a brick, forming a sturdy wall against doubt. Maria felt the warmth of approval as she glanced around the room, catching the eyes of a few board members who now seemed more intrigued. She breathed in confidence, building on the energy of their engagement. But then came her colleague's voice, measured yet saturated with skepticism. "Look, Maria, what's the practical application here? You suggest integrating this into the curriculum, but how do you foresee it being implemented without overwhelming our already packed schedules?" The challenge hung in the air, sharp and cold. In that moment, Maria felt a flicker of indignation. Wasn't this the very heart of innovation? What if we were to start with smaller workshops, engaging teachers to understand and convey the significance? "The potential for cross-curricular connections is rich," she suggested, willing herself to remain composed, to dismiss the raw flicker of defensiveness in her gut. "We can create tools for educators, training them to responsibly navigate these histories while enriching the academic experience." The murmurs resumed, a mixture of intrigue and dissent. Maria noticed the furrowing of Mr. Jenkins' brow, the small flash of doubt mirrored in the way he bit his lip. Maybe, just maybe, she was planting seeds. Challenging traditional thought seemed daunting, but invigorating. As the board members exchanged glances, Maria recognized that this confrontation had become an opportunity not just to enlighten them about the map's significance, but also to challenge her own limitations. Here she stood, defying that long-embedded fear of being overlooked, prepared to rise against the status quo. She could do this. However, a lingering anxiety simmered. Was this moment merely a stepping stone to greater resistance? The wave of uncertainty came crashing again. Could she withstand it if they rejected her ideas outright? With the atmosphere thickening once more, she clenched her jaw, preparing for whatever might come next. "Maria," Mr. Jenkins began again, "you really believe that this could change perspectives? What if the system doesn't respond?" The question hung heavily, promising confrontation. She knew it was the pivotal frame for her unfolding narrative, and the truth was, she was ready for each part of it. Perhaps, Maria thought as she met his gaze steadily, it's finally time to confront the past, engage the present, and seize the future. The room felt charged, a crucible where conviction met skepticism, and Maria's heart beat steadily against her ribcage, a drumbeat of defiance. Mr. Jenkins' question lingered as the board members exchanged glances, their collective uncertainty palpable. "Change requires courage and patience," Maria replied, forcing down the flutter of doubt that threatened to rise. "Yes, the system often stalls, but I believe that real transformation begins at the grassroots level. If we empower teachers to foster meaningful conversations, we can ripple out new practices throughout our educational framework. The scale might be gradual, but the impact can be profound. She observed Mr. Jenkins intently, searching for clues in his expression, a slight lift of the brow, a twitch of the lip. Each reaction felt heavy with implications. Could her accumulation of small victories lead to significant change? She questioned her ability to sustain momentum, aware that her vision was as much about advocacy as it was about action. The silence felt like an open wound, encouraging Maria's thoughts to spiral. What if, despite her preparations, her ambitions fell flat? Then there was a flicker of resolve, as she realized that uncertainty was simply part of the journey. She steadied herself, recalling the countless nights spent researching history, piecing together fragmented narratives, training herself to see those overlooked. Another board member cleared his throat, drawing scrutiny back to him. "And what if the educators resist?" he posed, his brow furrowed with legitimate concern. "We already face challenges with engagement. Won't this add to their frustration?" Maria squared her shoulders. She was no stranger to resistance. Change often feels uncomfortable, especially when years of tradition linger. She breathed in deeply, trying to convey the unyielding strength of her commitment. But if we present these stories as integral to our students' identities rather than mere add-ons, we foster engagement. They will see the value in connecting the past to their present. With every word, she was revealing a new layer of her own confidence. This confrontation was not merely a defense of her ideas, but a testament to her evolving belief in her own voice. Could it be that in championing other stories, she would simultaneously be crafting her own narrative of resilience? "Maria, you talk about integration and engagement, but what metrics will we use to evaluate success?" A familiar voice broke through the lingering tension. It was another colleague, known for his predisposition toward pragmatism over idealism. Something within Maria shifted, the seed of suggestion unfurling into growth. Success will reflect not only in improved test scores, but also in student discourse, their engagement with learning. Imagine classrooms where students feel empowered to connect their heritage to their education. That's success. The wall of doubt shifted slightly, and for a moment, the complexity muted the room's contention. Maria's explanation revealed a tangible vision, and the slightest hint of acknowledgement flickered in Mr. Jenkins' expression. A part of her longed for affirmation, yet she understood the road to influence was riddled with complexities. While the seeds of possibility settled in their minds, the persistent anxiety settled back into her chest, whispering cautions of failure. This meeting could merely end in polite dismissal, a classic protectiveness around entrenched beliefs. Still, Maria's determination surged. She realized this moment encompassed much of her multifaceted journey. "Look," she persisted, her voice more resonant now, "if we can make the past relatable and engaging, we redefine our education system's relationship with history. We owe it to our students, our future, to give them the tools to negotiate the narrative. If we become complacent, we risk breeding apathy." The board sat, deliberating deeply, and she could almost hear the mental cogs working through the weight of her words. But then, as Maria held her breath, the door to the boardroom creaked open, and a figure stepped in, a familiar face from the educational administration she had not seen in years. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, glancing at the assembled board, before locking eyes with Maria. "I think you all should hear about a recent initiative I'm launching that might directly intersect with what you're discussing." Her heart quickened, the gravity of this unexpected twist crashing into her. What options would arise from this convergence? She felt both hope rising and a new layer of tension settling, as possibilities unfolded like uncharted paths before her. Maria knew, at that moment, that her journey was just beginning. As the man stepped into the boardroom, an electric charge filled the air, and Maria's heart raced with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She recognized him immediately. Daniel Ramirez, a former colleague whose innovative approach to pedagogy had sparked many debates among the staff years ago. His presence was both a lifeline and a complication. He had always been a champion of progressive teaching, but had also mastered the art of inciting fear with his ambitious proposals. "Daniel," she greeted, voice barely concealing her apprehension. He nodded, his demeanor exuding quiet confidence. "We're at a turning point in how we teach history," he began, looking around the room. "As you've pointed out, it's essential to connect students with their identities through the narratives we present. I have a proposal that aligns with that vision, a mentorship program that pairs students with local historians and storytellers." The eyes of the board members shifted between Daniel and Maria. It was a moment ripe with potential, but also filled with the specter of conflict. Would they accept his initiative as a complementary approach, or see it as a competing philosophy that undermined her vision? Maria glanced at Mr. Jenkins, searching for his reaction. His expression was inscrutable. If anyone could sway the board in her favor, it was he. She felt a tightening in her chest, a blend of admiration for Daniel's boldness and fear of his overshadowing her efforts. This was not merely a clash of ideas, this was a confrontation of personal stakes. "Could you elaborate on how this program would integrate into our existing curriculum?" a member interjected, probing with cautious curiosity. Daniel launched into a detailed explanation filled with enthusiasm, illuminating the gaps he envisioned filling with rich, lived experiences. He addressed concerns about engagement by painting a vibrant picture of classes where students became active participants in history, hearing stories that framed their own lives. Maria listened, acutely aware that although his narrative was compelling, the depth of her own vision was yet to be heard. She cleared her throat, the urgency to articulate her ideas rising within her. "What I propose facilitates those connections too, but with a focus on ingrained practices within the classroom setting," she countered, feeling her voice grow stronger. "It's vital we empower teachers to weave those stories into their lessons, allowing history not just to be a series of events, but a vibrant tapestry reflecting our students' lives. The mentorship aspect is great, Daniel, but lasting change requires a fundamental shift in how we teach daily." The room grew silent. Interest peaked as boards flipped open to jot down notes. Maria felt a surge of empowerment, transforming the anxiety into intensity, revealing that the dialogue could encompass both proposals. Could they create something expansive that blended Daniel's initiative with her grassroots vision? This was an opportunity to elevate the discourse beyond competition. Daniel regarded her with an eyebrow raised, recognizing the merit in her assertion. Perhaps a collaboration could be the answer, merging mentorship with instructional frameworks. After all, the goal is to inspire engagement. She took a measured breath, aware of how these conversations shaped her trajectory. Here was the moment to elevate herself, not just as an advocate, but as a collaborator who could integrate diverse approaches for the benefit of the students they both cared about. The board members nodded thoughtfully, beginning to see the synergy crystallize before them. Maria felt a sense of clarity as conversations erupted around her, theories and ideas flowing like a torrent. Yet beneath that clarity, the whisper of doubt remained. Would her voice, now amplified, hold its ground in this newly forged partnership? Would they recognize her contributions as equal and valuable, or would it always be a secondary echo to Daniel's bold declarations? In her eagerness to forge connections, the lurking question loomed large. What sacrifices would she need to make to foster this collaborative environment? And would they leave room for her individual ambitions? As the meeting flowed into enthusiastic discussions, Maria's thoughts raced. She realized she wasn't just defending her vision anymore, she was shaping it amidst uncertainty and opportunity. With every deep breath, she breathed in fortitude, but also the weight of inevitable negotiations that lay ahead. "Let's pursue a pilot program that incorporates both our frameworks,"
Daniel proposed, cutting through her thoughts like a rapier. The board perked up, a glimmer of consensus flickering into view. Could this merger signal not only a pivotal moment in her career, but also bring to life the very changes she envisioned? Maria felt exhilarated yet apprehensive. The gravitational pull of this venture could redefine her path ahead. But as their ideas began intermingling, she realized even deeper questions lurked within her. What truly mattered to her own growth? And as she faced Daniel, a spark ignited both in her and the room, summoning unspoken tensions that clung to their evolving partnership. "Let's draft an outline for this," she suggested, her voice steady. "I have some ideas." As conversations sparked around her, she couldn't shake the feeling that a profound challenge lay ahead, testing not just the strength of her vision, but the strength of her resolve. The opportunity loomed, but it also raised a daunting prospect. How would she navigate this dynamic landscape of collaboration without losing sight of her own aspirations? The enthusiasm in the boardroom ebbed and flowed like a tide, the murmurs rising and falling with each shared idea. Maria watched as Daniel shifted seamlessly between groups, discussing logistics while maintaining a magnetism that engaged everyone. She felt a stifled impulse tugging at her to rally the room's energy around her own vision. Realizing that her perspective was taking a back seat to Daniel's charisma was unsettling. Each time she tried to contribute, a flicker of doubt flicked through her mind. Was her focus on empowering teachers overshadowed by his bold mentorship approach? The board members began to express excitement over proposed collaborations, and as they scribbled notes about mentorship circles and local historians, Maria wrestled with a growing discontent. What if Daniel's charismatic allure finessed the board into overlooking the core of sustainable teaching methods? What if they pursued a flashy program that wouldn't hold its promise in the long run? Her heart raced as she called on her courage. "We need to ensure that any pilot program we launch doesn't just add another layer of complexity," she interjected, her voice stronger now. "We have to prioritize developing a sustainable model that teachers can realistically implement without feeling overwhelmed. The foundation of education is rooted in teacher empowerment, not just temporary innovation." Heads turned, surprised by her unexpected assertiveness. Daniel paused, his gaze sharpening on her, as if weighing her words. That sharpness, though, was tinged with an oddly playful challenge, igniting the tension in the room. "Absolutely," he replied, a hint of respect underlying his tone. "Teachers must be supported in this process. Perhaps we can frame the mentorship in a way that complements their existing lesson structures. What are your thoughts on that?" The board's enthusiasm shifted back to Maria, sensing that a newfound synchronicity was possible. She had provoked a dialogue that could redefine both of their approaches. Could this be her way to stand firm, even within a partnership? The discussions picked up steam again, their ideas blending into a hybrid model that maintained both the mentorship aspect and a robust teacher training program. Yet, as the conversation swirled around, the edge of insecurity still pricked her conscience. Would the board view her contributions with resolve, or merely as an accessory to Daniel's grander scheme? During a break, she stepped outside the boardroom, seeking solace in a small courtyard adorned with blooming flowers. The fresh air steadied her. She realized that her conflict was not only rooted in the board's perceptions, but also in her own sense of worth. A quiet determination built within her. She had to shift her focus from simply defending her vision to actively owning.
This collaboration, while daunting, presented the perfect arena for her to step beyond self-doubt. Maria's heart surged with the understanding that within this partnership, she could cultivate an environment that respected her ideas, while benefiting immensely from Daniel's influence. Returning to the boardroom, Maria found her resolve redefined. As she prepared to present the next phases, she'd taken on a new role, not just a collaborator, but a powerful voice that would advocate for sustaining teacher engagement at the core of their ambitions.
"Let's outline our combined plans further," she proposed confidently, her pen poised over the notepad in front of her. "I want to ensure we have a clear path forward that aligns with both mentorship and teacher empowerment." But beneath the surface, the voice of caution whispered again. Amidst this flourishing collaboration, could she truly carve out her own space? Could her true aspirations thrive? Or would they continue to be overshadowed by dynamic personalities? As ideas flowed and discussion intensified, Maria understood that the critical moment for self-assertion was approaching. The foundation she would lay now would dictate the course of her career. And just before the heady dialogue burst forth into new proposals, she felt an unexpected chill, a premonition that a formidable challenge was lurking on the horizon, one that would test not just her resilience, but the very knitting of her professional identity. What was she willing to risk to ensure her vision remained unshaken in the face of collaboration? As the meeting reconvened, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Maria's earlier assertion reverberated in the air, carving out a space for her ideas. The board members leaned in, intrigued, and she could sense that they were beginning to regard her with a newfound seriousness. But with this shift came an acute awareness of the responsibility she now bore. She felt exposed in a way that both exhilarated and terrified her. Daniel's presence loomed large, and she caught him glancing her way, an invitation or a challenge. Yet Maria's focus was resolute. She opted to seize this momentum. If we are to engage teachers meaningfully, we must center their feedback in our model development, she articulated, her voice steady despite the tremor of urgency beneath. Shifting discussion back toward practical steps, she suggested creating a pilot program rooted in actual classroom experiences. The board responded enthusiastically, prompting several members to brainstorm the logistics of implementation. As ideas flowed, Maria's heart raced, not with doubt, but with a burgeoning confidence that her perspectives were valued. But just as she felt anchored, Daniel chimed in. "That's a robust approach, Maria. Let's consider introducing a digital platform to engage teachers more efficiently. What do you think?" The suggestion was sound, yet she sensed a strategic maneuver. It was Daniel's way of steering the narrative under the guise of collaboration, cementing his role as the principal authority. Maria remained composed. That could streamline communication, she acknowledged, then pivoted with precision. But let's ensure we incorporate personal mentorship as well. If teachers feel
Like just numbers in a system, they won't engage deeply with the framework. Subtle yet firm, she was reclaiming her space without outright confrontation. The meeting continued, but the undercurrents of unspoken competition between her and Daniel began to manifest, the atmosphere now thick with unvoiced tension. Every tentative agreement between them felt like a negotiation of power rather than true collaboration. As the board members rallied to support her ideas, she could see Daniel's brow furrow slightly, a flicker of irritation beneath his charming facade. After the meeting, Maria lingered, collecting her thoughts amongst the fray of papers and leftover coffee cups. The inflection point had arrived. She was compelled to choose how to navigate this burgeoning tension between her vision and Daniel's overarching dominance. Pausing in her solitude, she reflected on the value of intuition, a previously neglected instinct that now surged forward. Maria was learning to navigate the intricate dance of collaboration, but she also began to recognize a stark truth. For her voice to resonate authentically, she needed to be unapologetically herself, even if it meant clashing with Daniel directly. But confronting him posed risks. What if her approach alienated the board or diminished the collaborative spirit she sought? It was a moral dilemma braided with ambition. The question confronting her was not just about balance and partnership, but the fundamental integrity of her aspirations. As Maria gathered her courage, her phone buzzed with a notification. An email from a prominent educational blog inviting her to write a piece on teacher empowerment. It was an opportunity that could enhance her profile, but to accept it felt like stepping into the spotlight and away from the comfortable shadows of collaboration. The decision loomed, sharpening her focus. Would she embrace the vulnerability that accompanied boldness and visibility, or would she remain tethered to the collective progress they had initiated? The air in the boardroom had shifted again. The dynamics felt poised for disruption,
and Maria sensed that the moment had arrived. She would have to face Daniel and negotiate not just the project's terms, but the very space she inhabited within it. As determination ignited within her, so too did the realization. This journey was about more than just advocating for teachers. It was about redefining her own identity and establishing a professional ethos that aligned with her beliefs. The unwavering resolve bubbled to the surface as she prepared for the forthcoming confrontation. And while the boardroom awaited her next move, in her heart she knew that the stakes had never been higher. Would she harness this energy and embrace her individuality, or retreat, sabotaging her opportunity for personal and professional growth? The question remained as the door swung open. What would her next step reveal her true potential? Maria stared at the screen of her phone, the email from the educational blog glinting like a beacon of possibility. "Write about teacher empowerment," it read, a call to action whispering to her ambitions. But the dialogue still echoed in her mind,
stirring old anxieties as she weighed the implications of stepping into the limelight. Was she ready to fully embrace this role, or would she merely amplify her insecurities and doubts? She sighed, reflecting on the meeting. The energy had shifted. She was more than just a participant. She had driven discourse, but the mingling sense of triumph was tainted by Daniel's shadow. Would accepting this opportunity embolden her to push further against his influence, or would it fracture the fragile alliances she had already formed? Engaging openly in this context felt risky, yet stagnation would only guarantee that she remained a pawn in Daniel's game. In the back of her mind, a thought uncoiled, a small internal voice urging her to navigate this fractious relationship with intent and strategy. She could confront Daniel directly, challenge his authority in a constructive manner without alienating others. Perhaps sharing her thoughts publicly would bolster her standing within the board, recruits allies to her cause. Yet the potential fallout loomed large. A misstep could deep-six her credibility just as her career was on the precipice of ascendance. The chaos of the meeting room faded into the background. What truly mattered now was the emerging self that yearned to be expressed. She recalled a wise mentor's words, "Your voice is your power, Maria. Use it well." The pressure was mounting, yet clarity filled her mind. This wasn't merely about showing up for a project. It was a call for personal evolution, to be unapologetically herself, not just the person others expected. With her thoughts crystallizing, Maria drafted a response to the blog. She envisioned articulating a narrative that wove her experiences with real-world insights, emphasizing the critical role of teachers and their need for empowerment. Infusing it with her own struggles and victories would resonate with others experiencing the same battle for identity, for visibility in a male-dominated landscape. Before hitting send, she paused, heart pounding. What if this put her on a collision course with Daniel? The risk of reprisal from him was palpable, but that very fear illuminated her frustration with the status quo. Maria knew that standing her ground would not only challenge Daniel, but also define who she aspired to be. The decision was hers alone, and that sovereignty ignited a fierce flame within. Calmness enveloped her as she hit send, feeling the weight of hesitation lifted. Empowerment was not just an idea for her, it was a profound obligation to herself and those she sought to uplift. Yet, even as she experienced this small victory, an unsettling realization crept in. Daniel inherently would not take this lightly. She had set a precedent, opened a floodgate, and now he might feel pressured to respond to her newfound assertiveness. The moment he learned of her publication, there was no doubt he would try to undermine her. What then? Would she become just another footnote in his narrative of dominance? This question gnawed at her nerves, but with that discomfort came resolve. She couldn't backtrack. The time for hesitance was behind her. She had to prepare for battleground diplomacy with him, ever conscious of the stakes. Later, she met Daniel in the corridor, an electric pulse of tension ringing in the air. He wore his usual confident demeanor, but she sensed the unease lurking just beneath. It was as if he knew she had crossed a threshold into a realm where his authority could be contested. "The email I saw," he began, his voice smooth yet tinged with a caution that hinted at the struggle brewing underneath. "I think we need to talk about your approach moving forward." The gauntlet had been thrown. Would this conversation empower her to solidify her newfound stance, or would it shift the tide back into Daniel's control? Each microsecond stretched like an eternity, leaving her to question just how deeply she was willing to plunge into this confrontation. In that charged silence, Maria prepared herself for what lay ahead. The stage was set for the clash that both excited and terrified her. Would her security in her own voice consolidate her position, or would she find herself tangled in Daniel's strategies once more? The confrontation loomed, and Maria was acutely aware that this was just the beginning. Maria clenched her fists at her sides, her breath steadying as Daniel's words hung in the air like a challenge. This was a moment she had envisioned countless times, a definitive encounter where she could assert herself, marking a shift in the balance of power. As she met his gaze, she felt the trembling energy of her ambition and fear coalesce within her. "Are you suggesting I need to adjust my perspective?" Maria responded, her tone cool but controlled, masking the thunderous heartbeat echoing in her chest. It was her turn now, and she needed to project confidence. The uncertainty she had danced with for so long slipped away. She was ready to fight for her space in the educational narrative. Daniel's smile was disarming, though there was an underlying threat that sharpened his features. "No, I believe in collaboration. However, the approach you've taken might be misinterpreted. It's essential to consider how it reflects on the team." His guise of concern was palpable, but Maria recognized it for what it was, an attempt to contain her momentum. "The empowerment of teachers is not just a buzzword for me, Daniel," she shot back, each word a careful aim. "It's a necessary focus for this institution. My experiences, both good and bad, provide insight that could inspire change. I won't shy away from sharing that." The energy in her words was electric, and for the first time, the scales felt balanced. Daniel stepped back slightly, a flicker of surprise flashing across his face. "Ambition can be a double-edged sword, Maria. Be careful. The board values stability, and too much disruption can be detrimental." His warning felt less like advice and more like a ploy to pull her back under his control. "What do you consider disruptive?" asked, her voice firm. She had entered uncharted territory, but instead of retreating, she leaned in. "Is it questioning the status quo, or is it challenging established narratives that favor only a select few?" Each question was a stepping stone into the future she envisioned. The silence between them thickened until Daniel cleared his throat, regaining some of the dominion he was used to. "I think you're assuming a few things about how this works. Make no mistake, I'm here to support your growth, but you need to coexist with those in power." "Perhaps it's time to redefine power," Maria countered, her spirit ignited by the confrontation. It was exhilarating and frightening, yet she couldn't back down now. This was about more than just her career. It was a chance to inspire others and reshape the educational discourse. As they stood there, the world around them dimmed, her focus narrowing on this pivotal moment. "You know as well as I do that change doesn't happen by playing it safe. If I'm to be heard, to be understood, I must take risks. And I am willing to do that, even if it means taking you on. What's your next move, Daniel?" His expression hardened, and in that moment, Maria understood the gravity of her defiance. Daniel was not merely another colleague. He was a formidable opponent, one who would not yield easily. The stakes were rising, and the pressure was palpable. "Let's consult the board. I believe a collective decision on the approach will serve you well," he said, attempting to regain ground, though the authority in his voice had begun to unravel. Collective? You mean a vote? Maria raised an eyebrow, her confidence swelling. The same collective that has traditionally sidelined the voices that matter? This isn't a democracy. You're hoping to maintain control, to ensure nothing changes? Daniel narrowed his eyes, and for a moment she saw the flicker of doubt in them. Perhaps her challenge had caught him off guard. But would he concede, or would she need to prepare for a full-on assault against his influence? What she felt rising within her wasn't merely empowerment. It was the desire to forge a path through the resistance, to claim her rightful place. As she turned to leave, determination coursing through her veins, Maria knew the battle was far from over. With each moment, she felt the foundations of her narrative reshaping. But looming in her mind was the question: how would the board react to her bold stance? Would they view her as a pioneer or a threat? The air crackled with tension as a new possibility emerged, a presentation to the board that would solidify her ideas and challenge Daniel's grasp on authority. Could she galvanize their support while solidifying her own vision? Feeling emboldened, she made her way to her office, eager to begin crafting a strategy that would not just defend her voice, but amplify it across the very landscape that sought to quiet her. Had come for her to step onto a larger stage, but at what cost? The notion of confronting the board sent a shiver down her spine, yet a thrill wrapped around her heart. There was no turning back now, just the dawning realization that her journey was about to intensify. Would her vision capture the board's attention, or would they side with Daniel, reinforcing the very walls she aimed to dismantle? Maria was ready to find out. Standing in her office, Maria felt an electric charge within her, clarity illuminating the path forward. She was ready to confront the board, no longer just as an educator finding her place, but as a fierce advocate for change. No more would she shrink in the shadows of doubt or defer to the suppressive authority Daniel wielded. This was the moment to consolidate her vision, transform her narrative, and assert her rightful space in the educational discourse. Weeks of preparation culminated in this critical presentation, an inflection point not just for her project, but for her professional journey. Confidence coursed through her as she meticulously arranged her materials, ensuring that every detail reflected her values and the essential role of teacher empowerment. The map that had once symbolized mere history now became a dynamic blueprint for a future where students were woven into the fabric of their community, equipped with the knowledge to spark change. As she entered the boardroom, she felt an undeniable shift. The energy was charged, and she took her place at the head of the table. This was her domain now. With her vision crystallized, she began to deliver her presentation passionately, articulating the importance of integrating local narratives into the curriculum to foster connection and responsibility in students. Education thrives when we acknowledge the past, our heritage, and leverage that understanding to empower our future, she asserted, locking eyes with the board members, undeterred by lingering skepticism in the room. Her confidence grew with each slide, each word, a palpable testament to her transformation from insecurity to assure this. She observed the reactions unfolding across the table. Mr. Jenkins, once a source of doubt, appeared engaged, nodding thoughtfully as she spoke. Daniel's expression, meanwhile, demonstrated irritation, an undercurrent to his composure. She discerned that her voice was gaining traction, the board contemplating the merit of her proposals rather than dismissing them outright. In a critical moment, she presented the collaborative framework she envisioned, not merely as a response to Daniel's mentorship model, but as a symbiotic partnership that blended their strengths. This proposal was deliberately crafted to dismantle barriers, to forge a cohesive strategy that incorporated teacher empowerment while also enriching the mentorship approach. It's imperative that we equip our educators with the tools they need, she explained, to navigate the complexities of our history and its profound relevance to their teaching. When she finished, a hush enveloped the room, the weight of her revelations palpable as collective contemplation hung in the air.
Anticipation coursed through her veins as hands began to rise, board members posing.
Thoughtful questions. Questions that weren't rooted in opposition, but rather curiosity and support. A far cry from the earlier dismissive exchanges, their engagement signaled the first steps toward validation. Then, in an unexpected turn, Daniel raised his hand, breaking his silence. "I respect the vision you've put forth, Maria. While I have reservations," he acknowledged reluctantly, "I can see its merit. Perhaps we can work together to refine our approaches rather than view them as separate agendas." Maria's heart soared as she recognized the shift. The winds of change were truly at her back. The dialogue transformed into a collaborative exploration of ideas, illuminating the potential synergies between her vision and Daniel's. This wasn't an erasure of her identity, it was an expansion to include another perspective. The culmination of her efforts materialized as the board unanimously endorsed the pilot program. A mixture of elation and relief washed over her. This victory was more than an approval of a project. It marked her metamorphosis into a recognized voice within the very fabric of her institution. Later that day, Maria stood in the courtyard, warmth from the sun washing over her as she reveled in the victory. She'd achieved what she set out to do, reclaiming not only her family's narrative, but also carving space for educators and students like her. It was not just an individual triumph, but a collective stride toward equity in education. Her phone buzzed again, a notification about the blog piece she had published weeks before. It was generating buzz within the community. She felt fulfillment swell in her chest, her voice echoing beyond institutional walls, resonating with countless educators who yearned for the same empowerment she now felt. Reflecting on where she began, with self-doubt and fear, she acknowledged a profound transformation. She had conquered not just the professional conflict that had stifled her, but had emerged as a leader within her sphere. The journey had taught her resilience, the power of collaboration, and, crucially, the need to honor her own narrative within the larger discourse. In this moment of clarity, Maria embraced her journey ahead. She was ready to advocate for change, not just as a professional, but as a beacon for others seeking their voices. This was only the beginning. Now it's your turn to act. You need to subscribe now to follow the incredible journeys of transformation and empowerment. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, ensuring more stories get the recognition they deserve. Comment your reactions and theories about Maria's inspiring journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Empower them to embrace their own paths to transformation.